warp does not know peace. It churns and screams without rest, an ocean of anguish that feeds upon every heartbeat in the galaxy. For 10,000 years, the Chaos Gods have ruled this domain of madness, unchallenged, unending. But tonight something moves within that storm. It begins as a vibration, small and alien to this place. Not a thought, not a prayer, a presence, something ancient stripped of divinity yet older than fear itself. The demons feel it before they see it. Across the brass plains of Khorne's realm, warlords pause mid-battle as the air thickens with a sound they cannot name. It is not the roar of engines nor the hymn of the dying. It is rage given shape. And when it steps from the rippling veil, the Imperium itself recoils. A figure in broken armor, green as corroded copper, strides through the storm carrying a weapon that hums with mortal hunger. Every demon that looks upon him feels something it has never known: recognition. The warp calls him by 1,000 names, none spoken aloud. The Godslayer, the Doomwalker, the mortal that hell could not keep. He calls himself nothing. He came to the warp for one reason only: to finish what he began. If the idea of a mortal weapon walking through the realms of chaos draws you in, if you want to see what happens when the fury of doom meets the madness of Warhammer, then stay with this story. Like, share, and subscribe your vigilance, for this descent will not be told again. Every realm will burn before this is over. The void was quiet at first, no warp storms, no shrieking hymns, just the deep, endless hum of the Imperium, calm before the convulsion. Then in a single breath, reality tore open. An Imperial fleet vanished into that wound, its ships swallowed whole by a storm that no astropath could name. On the bridge of the Gloria Victus, crewmen screamed prayers as lightning made of memory tore through the decks. Servitors burst into flame. The Geller field flickered. And for a heartbeat, just one, the warp went still. Something was coming through. A shape fell from the rupture, a figure of metal and ruin, crashing onto a field of brass skulls that stretched farther than sight. The air hissed like boiling blood. He rose. The armor was alien, scarred and ancient, glowing faintly through fractures in its plating. His visor burned a dull, accusing green. His boots sank into a ground made of fused bone. Around him, demons gathered, drawn by the scent of something that didn't belong. The Doomslayer said nothing. He never did. The first to move was a bloodletter, crimson skin slick with the reflection of endless fire. It roared and lunged, blade raised high. The Slayer caught its sword arm mid-swing and crushed it until bone turned to dust. He drove the creature into the ground, its body breaking with the sound of cracking armor. Then came the rest. A dozen demons leapt from the molten horizon. The Slayer drew his weapon, a jagged fusion of mortal steel and something older. It thrummed in his grip, eager. He moved faster than any human should, carving through flesh that regenerated even as it died. The air was thick with the sound of slaughter, wet, rhythmic, unrelenting. The warp watched. Each demon that fell didn't simply die. It ceased to exist. Its essence, its psychic core burned to ash. The Imperium trembled as the impossible occurred. Something had killed what could not be killed. Khorne felt it first. The blood god's domain darkened. The rivers of gore slowed, as though the brass plains themselves held their breath. On his throne of skulls, Khorne opened his burning eyes and felt for the first time in 10,000 years a presence he did not command. Below, the Slayer stood among corpses that dissolved into vapor. The ground beneath his boots pulsed like a heartbeat. He looked upward, visor glowing, scanning a sky that screamed with color. The demons that survived fled into the storm, their bodies flickering like dying embers. None dared to look back. The Slayer holstered his weapon, the movement slow, deliberate. In the silence that followed, only the faint hum of his armor remained, a mechanical heartbeat against the pulse of a universe made of nightmares. He turned toward the horizon. There was no sun, only the endless crimson glow of Khorne's world. Mountains of skulls towered like cathedrals. Rivers of blood flowed uphill. The air itself growled. Yet the Slayer walked forward, undeterred, his shadow stretching across eternity. Somewhere deep in the warp, something ancient whispered a single word, a name that had not been spoken in ages. Doom. The ground rumbled beneath his feet as he advanced, each step echoing like thunder in a realm that was never meant to know silence. The warp reacted to him, bending, recoiling, remembering. Where his boots fell, the brass planes cracked, and rivers of blood pulled back as if fearing to touch him. The Doomslayer walked through the desolation of Khorne's domain with no hesitation, his visor flickering with spectral data as the air burned with every breath. The sky above him boiled, a furious crimson sea where the faint silhouettes of greater demons circled, watching, uncertain. None descended. None dared. He moved toward the horizon where an ancient fortress loomed, a citadel forged entirely from skulls. Thousands of them, fused together into grotesque arches, the remnants of champions long forgotten. The walls bled light, their surface alive with runes that hissed his arrival. The intruder walks. The words slithered through the air like whispers. The one who kills without faith. Within the citadel a host assembled. Bloodletters gathered in ranks, chains of brass linking them to pillars of bone. Skull cannons aimed their hellfire toward the approaching shadow. Above them, a bloodthirster, massive wings spread like torn banners, bellowed across the battlefield. Mortal! Its voice cracked the sky, shaking the very fabric of the warp. You trespass upon the blood god's realm. You bring no offering, no devotion. You will bleed until Khorne knows your name. The Doomslayer did not answer. He reached over his shoulder and drew his blade, blackened, serrated, engraved with runes that predated the Imperium. The weapon hummed, alive as if eager for what was to come. The demons charged. The first wave met him in a tide of steel and screaming flame. The Slayer met it head-on, his movements precise and inhumanly efficient. Each swing of his blade tore through bodies that reformed too slowly to fight back. Heads rolled. Limbs evaporated. Ichor painted the air in arcs of gold and red. He was faster than thought. One bloodletter leapt high, landing on his back, clawing at the seals of his armor. The Slayer grabbed its arm and hurled it skyward. A shot from his shoulder cannon turned the demon into a red mist before it hit the ground. The second wave broke before reaching him. The bloodthirster roared in fury, taking to the sky with wings of molten leather. Its chain axe burned with the souls of 1,000 victims as it dove toward him, the air distorting under its weight. The impact shattered the plains, throwing the Slayer back. For the first time he knelt. The demon grinned, a grotesque, fanged crescent stretching across its face. You are no god, it hissed. You are nothing. The Slayer rose. Slowly, deliberately. His gauntlet clenched around the hilt of his weapon until the metal sang. His visor flared brighter, no rage, no emotion, only purpose. The bloodthirster swung. The axe screamed as it fell. The Slayer stepped forward, ducked beneath the arc, and drove his blade into the demon's chest. It roared. The wound did not bleed, it burned. Light, not blood, poured from it. The warp screamed as the energy that held the creature together collapsed in on itself. The explosion ripped the horizon apart. When the smoke cleared, only the Slayer remained, standing amid a crater of molten brass. The fortress walls trembled. Demons howled in mourning. In the distance, something vast stirred, the throne itself. A ripple spread through the crimson sea of the warp as Khorne's attention fixed fully upon the intruder. Every demon in his realm froze, every weapon fell silent. The Slayer turned his head toward the tremor that rolled across reality. His visor reflected a far-off mountain made of skulls that reached higher than the sky itself, a mountain that breathed. And upon it, a throne of iron and bone began to move. The blood god was rising. The warp rumbled like a dying sun as Khorne stirred upon his throne. The chains that bound his dominion rattled in the molten sky, and from every corner of his realm came the same pulse, a rhythm of war that had never ceased, but now beat faster. A mortal had entered his house. A thing of flesh and steel had slain one of his generals. And in that impossible act, the oldest god of war remembered fear. The Doomslayer did not know the word. He advanced through the aftermath of his battle, his armor scorched and blackened, the surface glowing with faint runes that flickered like the heartbeat of something ancient beneath. The rivers of blood that crisscrossed the plains now ran backward, pulled toward the mountain that crowned Khorne's domain. It was as if the entire realm sought to drag him before its master. He led it. Each step brought him deeper into the heart of violence. The sky split with bolts of crimson lightning that left after images of dying worlds. The air was thick with the scent of copper and heat. In the distance he could hear it. the sound of millions of demons chanting in unison. The language was not meant for mortal tongues, but the meaning was clear. The god of war is watching. As he climbed the mountain of skulls, lesser demons attacked in waves. Not to kill him. They had learned that was impossible, but to delay him. Each death sent ripples through the warp, brief flashes of pain that fed their god's hunger. And yet with every blow the Slayer delivered, something changed in the fabric of that place. The brass beneath his feet cooled. The rivers thinned. The storm dimmed. It was as though the warp itself recoiled from his existence, unable to reconcile what he was. He was not psychic, not a soul to be claimed, not a worshipper to be broken. He was matter made will, fury given permanence. By the time he reached the plateau, the demons had stopped coming. Before him stretched an altar the size of a city, carved from the bones of extinct gods. Weapons of impossible scale lay half buried in the brass, axes larger than titans, skulls the size of fortresses. The air itself was molten, vibrating with the weight of divine wrath. And then, from the clouds above, two burning eyes opened. They were not metaphor. They were Khorne's eyes. Each glowed with a heat that could melt the hull of a battleship. Each saw the Doomslayer standing alone amid the silence. A deep voice rolled through creation, not in sound but in pressure. Mortal. The word shattered the altar. Waves of energy rippled outward, flaying the lesser demons that still lingered. The Slayer stood unflinching. You enter my domain as a thief, a killer of my children. The blood god's laughter shook the mountains. You think you know war? The Slayer tilted his head, visor reflecting firelight. He said nothing. I have drunk the blood of angels and devils alike. I have broken empires and watched galaxies burn. I am the beginning and end of all conflict. The air trembled with the weight of the proclamation. The brass planes beneath the Slayer liquefied, forming rivers that spiraled toward the throne. And then the voice softened. But you, Khorne's tone changed, not mockery, not anger, curiosity. You kill without prayer. You destroy without pleasure. Your rage does not feed me. The sky dimmed. The storm halted. What are you? The Doomslayer reached to his belt and drew his shotgun, its barrel scarred, its steel blackened by 10,000 battles. He raised it toward the throne. The sound of the hammer cocking was his only answer. Khorne laughed. The sound was like planets breaking. Then show me. The ground exploded. Chains tore free from the mountain. Whips of molten iron lashing across the plains. The Slayer ran toward the throne, firing into the storm, each shot cracking like thunder. Demons fell by the dozen, not slain but erased. Their essences turned to nothingness where his shells struck. And still he advanced. Khorne's laughter followed him down the mountain, shaking reality itself. The blood god's rage filled the air, but beneath it, something else. Something new. Khorne was not mocking him anymore. He was enjoying himself. Khorne rose from his throne, and the act alone reshaped the landscape. Mountains cracked open. Rivers of blood ignited into firestorms that coiled into the air like serpents. The roar that followed could have silenced entire worlds. The Doomslayer didn't stop. He sprinted toward the foot of the throne, boots pounding across the heaving brass plains as each impact sent shockwaves rolling outward. He vaulted over the burning fissures, firing as he ran, the thunder of his shotgun echoing like a heartbeat through the warp. Every blast left after images of holy light, the kind of purity that did not belong here, that defied the will of chaos itself. The demons that rose from the molten ground to bar his path were not born of random hatred now. They were fragments of Khorne's will, avatars of rage shaped from the god's very essence. They charged as one, roaring his name, but the Slayer's movements were precise, each strike a sentence of annihilation. His blade sang, and for the first time in millennia, the warp's song faltered. The god of war leaned forward upon his throne. His voice rolled through the storm, low and resonant, vibrating through matter and memory alike. I have seen billions die in my name, but you kill as if you hate death itself. The Slayer leapt, cleaving through a greater demon that stood twice his height, its skull spilling across the plain like coins from a broken altar. He landed hard, the ground fracturing under his weight. He reloaded with the speed of instinct and fired again, the recoil rattling the bones of extinct titans that littered the battlefield. The warp recoiled at his presence. The rules that had governed its existence since the dawn of time began to fracture. Where he walked, the immaterial thickened into matter, dense and resistant, as if the act of his defiance rewrote the nature of this place. Khorne's laughter thundered again, this time tinged with respect. You cannot be Devour-Ed. You cannot be corrupted. His voice boomed like avalanches across the realm. You are pure. He said the word as if it were an obscenity. The Doomslayer said nothing. He never had to. His silence was louder than Khorne's fury, his intent more absolute than any prayer. When the last demon fell, when the air was still and the battlefield silent except for the hiss of molten brass cooling under his boots, he raised his gaze to the god who ruled it all. Khorne looked down at him, eyes burning brighter now, the fires of 10,000 wars reflecting within them. For a long moment neither moved. Then the blood god stood fully, his immense form rising beyond the limits of perception. From his shoulders cascaded rivers of fire, each drop an echo of a fallen warrior's final scream. His axe, the end of kings, materialized in his hand, so large its blade eclipsed the horizon. I have waited an eternity for a worthy foe, Khorne said, his voice both roar and whisper. Come, mortal, feed me one last war. The Doomslayer looked up at the sky that had become flame, his visor reflecting the god's towering shadow. He holstered his shotgun, drew his blade once more, and charged. Khorne met him halfway. When the two forces collided, the realm itself screamed. The impact flattened mountains and shattered reality into fragments of red and gold. Demons across the warp fell to their knees as the shockwave tore through their domains. The other chaos gods paused, Slaanesh mid-song, Nurgle mid-chuckle, Tzeentch mid-calculation, and turned their gaze toward the impossible. In the heart of Khorne's realm, for the first time since the beginning of eternity, a god bled. The Slayer's blade had pierced divine flesh. Golden ichor rained down, hissing as it struck the ground, burning through mountains of skulls. The blood god's laughter turned into a growl, then a roar so vast it shattered time itself. Reality split open again, and the two figures vanished into the tear. Only silence remained, a silence so deep that even the warp dared not fill it. In that emptiness, a single thought lingered, whispered not by a demon, but by the warp itself. He kills gods the way other men kill ours. And somewhere beyond, the architect of fate smiled. When the light returned, it was not red. The air shimmered in shades of violet and gold, fragrant with incense and blood. The Doomslayer stood amid impossible beauty, an alien perfection sculpted from madness. Towers of ivory curved into the sky, their edges pulsing with heartbeat rhythms. The ground beneath him was glass, and through it he could see rivers of souls twisting like smoke. He was no longer in Khorne's domain. The storm of violence had given way to silence, to music that seemed to hum directly inside his armor. Each note whispered promises of rest, of satisfaction, of release. It crawled beneath his skin like warmth. He ignored it. He looked to the horizon and saw movement, shapes dancing in the haze, lithe and elegant, moving with a precision that mocked grace. Their faces were masked in silver, their eyes glowing with impossible color. The air trembled as they spoke his name, their voices harmonizing into something almost human. Slayer, they sang, the unbroken flame, the child of wrath. You have bled in every world but never healed. Do you not tire of war? He raised his weapon. They only laughed. Where Khorne's servants had roared, these creatures purred. They moved like silk in a breeze, circling him, never quite touching. The scent of them was sweet rot. Pleasure decayed into something sacred. They carried blades that shimmered with both venom and invitation. From the darkness beyond, a larger figure emerged, and even the warp seemed to hold its breath. The Prince of Excess approached, tall, beautiful, monstrous. Slaanesh's form shifted with every heartbeat, now man, now woman, now both, now neither. Eyes like twin suns burned with the coldness of understanding. Every movement radiated purpose, every gesture a test. The god smiled. You reek of Khorne's breath, Slaanesh said softly. Tell me, little storm, did the butcher scream when you cut him? The Slayer didn't answer. He never did. Slaanesh tilted their head, amused. Ah, the silence. That's your gift, isn't it? The void between the scream and the prayer. The purity of unspoken rage. The god leaned closer until the air between them trembled. I could teach you to make it mean something. The ground shifted, transforming into a cathedral of mirrors. Each reflection showed a different version of him. In one, his armor unscarred. In another, his helmet gone, eyes closed in peace. In a third, his body kneeling before a golden throne that was not of the Emperor. "Look," the prince whispered. "You've been fighting so long, you've forgotten what you're fighting for. You are not mortal anymore. You are hunger without end." Slaanesh's voice was honeyed venom, smooth and heavy. "I can end that hunger. I can give you a world without fear, without guilt. You have earned that peace." For the first time, the Slayer hesitated. His hands clenched, fingers trembling on the weapon's grip. Memories flickered behind the visor. Faces of the dead, the smell of ash, the endless cycle of slaughter. There was no victory, only motion. Perhaps that was the cruelest truth of all. He was not guided by duty or hope. Only momentum. The mirrors rippled. Each reflection turned to face him, their visors lighting up one by one, each whispering words he had never allowed himself to speak. "You can stop now." Slaanesh extended a hand, fingers long and glistening with light. "You've slain gods. Let me make you one." The warp went utterly silent. Even the music died, and in that silence, the Doomslayer moved. He stepped forward, closing the distance in a single breath, and drove his blade through the Prince of Excess's chest. Light poured from the wound, not blood, not ichor, but radiance, as if he had struck the heart of every false promise ever spoken. The mirrors shattered. The demons screamed, their beauty melting into shrieking chaos. Slaanesh smiled even as their body fell apart, voice still a whisper inside his mind. "Even your rejection is worship." The palace of perfection collapsed around him, folding into void. And for a heartbeat, before the warp swallowed it whole, the Slayer stood in the ruins, surrounded by the ghosts of his reflections, all of them smiling. The palace was gone, but its echoes remained. Fragments of glass floated through the void, each one a mirror holding the faint reflection of Slaanesh's smile. The shards drifted around the Doomslayer like stars, whispering in the voices of those he'd killed. Each fragment called to him, tempting, pleading, promising, but his silence devoured them one by one. He moved through the wreckage, his armor scorched, his blade still glowing with the god's fading light. Every step sent ripples through the warp's silken veil. The void responded to him now, bending, not as an enemy but as something wounded trying to understand its own killer. The whispers grew louder. They weren't Slaanesh anymore. They were everyone, the children who had prayed for salvation, the soldiers who had died screaming his name, the worlds he had saved only to watch them fall again. Each voice spoke softly, not accusingly, but with the quiet sadness of truth. "You don't fight to protect. You fight because you must, because you don't know how to stop." The Slayer paused. He felt the weight of infinity pressing against his armor, each heartbeat heavier than the last. The warp had no gravity, yet his body ached as though the universe itself were trying to pull him apart. In the distance, color began to return, a faint shimmer, a shifting horizon of impossible blues and golds. He walked toward it, and the air thickened, filled with scent and sound that didn't belong to any reality he knew. The whispers twisted into song again, and he realized he was not alone. From the endless dark rose the remnants of Slaanesh's court, demons reconstituting from memory. Their forms were incomplete, smeared like wet paint on glass. They didn't attack. They performed. Hundreds of them danced silently in the void, their bodies moving in unnatural synchrony, each one bleeding light from 1,000 wounds. The melody they made was pain made beautiful. Despair turned into art. It was a farewell to their god and somehow a tribute to him. He walked through them like a storm through silk. As he passed, each dancer froze mid-motion, their bodies cracking and crumbling into dust. They dissolved in silence, their gestures preserved only in echoes. By the time he reached the heart of their circle, none remained. But something else waited there. A figure sat upon a throne of shattered mirrors, draped in a cloak of color that shifted with every blink. It was Slaanesh again, but smaller now, weaker, almost human. Their form flickered between man and woman, between beauty and ruin. Their voice, when it came, was soft as breath. "You cannot kill what is a reflection," they whispered. "I am the moment before your rage. I am the heartbeat between violence and peace. You carry me as surely as you carry your weapon." The Slayer's visor flared. Without hesitation, he raised his gun and fired. The bolt struck through the god's chest, shattering them like glass. But as they broke apart, their voice remained echoing around him everywhere, nowhere. Tell me, Hunter, when the last god falls, what will be left of you? The light went out. The warp trembled. In the silence that followed, the Doomslayer stood amid nothingness. No sound, no color, only the hollow weight of existence itself. Then, from the far reaches of the void, something stirred. It was not rage this time, nor lust. It was laughter, a sound like parchment tearing, like machinery grinding against fate. The laughter multiplied, filling the void with the sound of thought itself breaking apart. And as the world reassembled, he found himself standing within a labyrinth of crystal and light. A place where walls moved, where cause and effect folded in on themselves. The air smelled of ozone and deceit. Slaanesh was gone, but another presence waited, one that had been watching him since the beginning. A voice, dry and patient, spoke from everywhere at once. Impressive. You've made the warp bleed. The Doomslayer turned slowly, scanning the twisting corridors. The voice continued, a whisper wrapped in irony. You've slain hunger and hate. Now let's see how you fare against knowledge. A faint shimmer passed before him, coalescing into a shape with wings of glass and eyes like burning galaxies. Tzeentch smiled. The air itself thought in this place. Every breath the Doomslayer took came back to him as a whisper. Every step echoed twice, once in sound, once in idea. He was inside a labyrinth that was not made of stone but of concepts. Walls folded into doors that opened into memories. Time bent like light in water. It was not a place meant for mortals but for schemes. Tzeentch watched from nowhere and everywhere, his voice dripping through the corridors like liquid mercury. You have no soul, yet you unmake souls. The tone was curious, playful. You have no destiny, yet you end destinies. Fascinating paradox, the Slayer ignored it. He had learned long ago that words were traps. He kept moving. His boots hit the mirrored floor, leaving ripples instead of footprints. His visor flickered as reality shifted with each step. One moment the passage stretched into infinity. The next it curled in on itself like a serpent devouring its own tail. A door appeared where there had been none, carved with symbols that rearranged themselves as he watched. It swung open soundlessly, and beyond it he saw himself, not a reflection, a version. The other Slayer stood in the same armor, but his visor was cracked, his movements slower. Behind him burned 1,000 worlds, the wreckage of what might have been. His voice when he spoke was not a voice at all, but the echo of a thought. You've done this before. The Slayer raised his weapon, but the copy mirrored him. Both fired. Both shots collided in midair, freezing time. The explosion hung between them like a suspended heartbeat. Tzeentch's laughter slithered through the stillness. Every outcome is written except yours. You're a blank page in a library that stretches forever. Do you know what that does to a god? The Slayer didn't answer. He charged forward, straight through the frozen explosion, the shards of time slicing against his armor like razors. He tackled his doppelganger to the ground, blade driving into mirrored flesh. But when the blade struck, it met not resistance but water. The figure dissolved into color, then into light. Reality bent again. He was standing in a library now, endless, cathedral high, filled with books that breathed. Each tome whispered his name in 1,000 different languages, all variations of Slayer, Destroyer, Unmaker. The shelves stretched forever, twisting upward into constellations. From between them came the god. Tzeentch did not walk. He unfolded, his body made of wings and eyes and faces that blinked in and out of existence. Every feather held a universe, every eye a prophecy. His voice wasn't heard, it was understood. You think you fight chaos, the god murmured. You are chaos. You break every pattern, every fate, every ending. I am order's undoing, and yet you undo me. Tell me, mortal, what do you believe in? The Slayer stared through his visor. There was no answer. There never had been. Tzeentch smiled, 1,000 smiles across 1,000 faces. Exactly. He raised one of his many hands, and the books around them ignited, their pages spinning into the air like wings. The labyrinth collapsed inward, turning the world into an ocean of thought and memory. Every moment of the Slayer's existence, every battle, every scream, every fragment of purpose rose up around him, twisting into a spiral that led to the god's heart. This is what you are, Tzeentch whispered, his voice now inside the Slayer's mind, a pattern that consumes patterns. A question without an answer. The god extended his clawed hand. Let me understand you. The Doomslayer raised his weapon. The world froze. The stars themselves paused as though the act of aiming defied cosmic law. And then he fired. The blast hit Tzeentch square in the chest. For a moment, the god didn't move. Then, slowly, impossibly, he began to unravel, his feathers turning to ash, his eyes shattering like glass marbles. But even as he fell, his voice persisted, calm and thoughtful. Every death is a door. The library folded inward, collapsing into a single point of light that swallowed them both. When the Doomslayer's vision cleared, he was no longer in the labyrinth. He stood upon a field of rusted gears the size of cities, turning in perfect synchronization. The sky above was not sky, it was a machine, and in the distance a bell tolled, a sound of age, of inevitability. A whisper passed through the air, colder than void. Welcome to the edge of decay. He was in the realm of Nurgle. The air was heavy here, thick as oil, warm as rot. It clung to the Doomslayer's armor, seeping into the cracks, humming with a slow, infectious life. The ground pulsed beneath his boots like flesh trying to remember it was once alive. Around him, the world groaned in perpetual birth and death, vines sprouting from rust, blooming into eyes, collapsing into sludge again. This was not the clean madness of Tzeentch's labyrinth, nor the cruel beauty of Slaanesh's palace. This was the truth of the warp's body, the inevitability that everything that lives must decay. A low, wet laugh rolled through the mist. Ah. Another visitor. How rare. The voice was warm, almost tender, echoing with the intimacy of a confession. From the fog came the stench of disease, the sound of countless wings beating in unison. Then the god emerged. Nurgle was vast, not in height but in presence. His bulk filled the horizon, his smile vast and genuine, his eyes pools of sorrow and joy entwined. His skin was a garden of ruin, boils the size of cities, tendrils of mold and fungi sprouting from every fold. The air around him shimmered with life, the wrong kind of life. The Doomslayer stood silent and unblinking. The god chuckled softly, a sound like bubbling mud. You've been tearing through my siblings' little playgrounds, haven't you? So angry, so lonely, such beautiful rage. Nurgle lowered himself, the earth quaking as he spoke like a father kneeling to greet a child. And yet, you don't spread. You don't grow. You destroy. Oh, my dear boy, don't you see? You're sick too. You're my finest creation, though you never asked to be. The Doomslayer raised his shotgun and fired into the god's chest. The shot echoed like thunder, the pellets embedding into layers of divine rot. They hissed, burned, dissolved, and from each wound flowers bloomed. Great weeping blooms of pus and color unfurled across Nurgle's skin, and he laughed all the louder. Yes, that's it, he wheezed, clapping his colossal hands. Life from death, pain into renewal. You are my child. The Slayer said nothing. He reloaded, fired again. The blast tore a hole through the god's cheek. A dozen Nurgling creatures tumbled out, giggling as they hit the ground, their little hands waving cheerfully at their accidental father. Stop fighting, Nurgle said gently. Rest, let me hold you. Let me give you peace. You've done enough, haven't you? The Slayer took a step forward. Then another. The ground around him churned, birthing creatures by the thousands. Fly-headed demons, slug-bodied horrors, beings that should not have been capable of laughter but laughed anyway. They swarmed toward him, arms outstretched in grotesque welcome. He cut them down. The chainsaw roared, its teeth singing through meat and mucus alike. Each swing cleared space, but the demons did not retreat. They embraced their deaths as offerings, their dissolving bodies adding to the fertile ground beneath his boots. Don't you understand? Nurgle's tone softened further. You can't win here. Every drop of blood feeds me. Every act of destruction gives birth to more. You are life pretending to be death. The Slayer stopped. His visor gleamed with the reflection of the god's endless smile. For the briefest moment, the world went quiet. No movement, no laughter, no decay. Then the ground beneath him cracked, and from it rose a tendril of blackened rot that lashed upward, wrapping around his arm. The armor smoked where it touched him. He tore it free, the tendril ripping apart with a sound like a scream trapped underwater. He aimed, fired again and again and again, each shot blasting pieces of the god into vapor. But the vapor only fell as rain, birthing more life where it landed. Nurgle's laughter deepened, shaking the sky. Do you see, my boy? You can't end what doesn't die. The Doomslayer stared for a long time. Then slowly he dropped his weapon. The god blinked. Oh? The Slayer reached to his chest plate, tearing open the seals that hissed and bled light. Beneath the armor, a faint glow pulsed, not divine, not demonic, pure energy, the essence of his will. He gripped it, twisted, and pulled. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. Then he threw it. The light hit Nurgle's chest and detonated. Not fire, not plasma, but absence. It burned away the concept of life itself. Where it touched, growth ceased. Decay halted. Time froze. The god's laughter turned into a long, wet gasp. The plague fields went silent. The blossoms turned to ash. Nurgle stared down at him, eyes filled not with anger, but awe. You killed life. The Slayer said nothing. He turned, walking through the drifting smoke of a dying god. Behind him, the garden of decay shriveled into a wasteland of black glass. In the stillness that followed, a wind rose. It carried no stench, no song, only clarity. The voice that came next was not kind, not mocking, not cruel. It was cold, resonant, inevitable. You've cut too deep, Slayer. Even gods bleed meaning when you kill this much. He looked up. The sky had opened. The stars were gone, and in their place, a light like the sun of creation burned above, golden, infinite, and watchful. The warp trembled. Something far beyond chaos had begun to notice him. The warp fell silent. For the first time since the birth of gods, since the first mortal thought gave shape to the sea of souls, there was quiet. Not peace, never peace, but absence. The kind of silence that made eternity itself flinch. The Doomslayer stood alone amid the aftermath of death beyond death. Nurgle's garden was gone. Slaanesh's palace had turned to dust. The labyrinth of Tzeentch lay shattered, its schemes dissolving into meaningless color. Even Khorne's realm, the endless storm of war, was still. The gods of chaos had fallen silent, their whispers fading into a single, trembling breath that rolled through the Imperium. Every demon, every corrupted soul, every nightmare that had ever drawn power from their endless appetite stopped mid-motion. The warp's tide slowed, the storm froze. All of creation seemed to wait. And then the light came. It was not warp fire or the illusion of hope. It was gold, pure, radiant, terrifying in its perfection. The Doomslayer turned toward it, visor darkening automatically as the brilliance grew. The light burned away color itself, revealing something beyond even chaos. The source. He was standing on the edge of something vast, something that was not a place, but a truth. The warp peeled away like old skin, and beyond it, he saw a figure sitting upon a throne of light. He had seen gods before. He had killed gods before, but not this one. The golden throne shone in his visor, infinite and distant, yet impossibly near. Upon it sat the Emperor of mankind, or perhaps what remained of him. A shape of brilliance held together by faith. Machinery and a billion prayers whispered through millennia. The voice that filled the void was not sound. It was understanding. You do not belong here. The Slayer's grip tightened on his weapon. The words vibrated through every atom of his being. You are not mine. You are not theirs. You are what comes when purpose dies but motion remains. You are will without soul, rage without root. The light pulsed, gentle, vast, sorrowful. You were made in another war by hands that defied the same doom you now bring. You are not a servant of chaos nor an angel of order. You are exile. The Doomslayer said nothing, but his silence carried weight. He had known exile. He had walked through hells and heavens alike, always alone. The Emperor's radiance dimmed slightly, the light narrowing into something almost human. The warp cannot contain you, but neither can the material. You have broken the circle that binds life to belief. You are uncreation given purpose. But even uncreation cannot walk forever. For the first time, the Slayer hesitated. His hands lowered slightly, weapon pointed toward the ground. Around him, fragments of the warp began to crumble, dissolving into dust that fell upward into the endless gold. From the distant void, the faintest sound of chanting echoed, the voices of billions across the Imperium, worshipping the light that now faced him. The Emperor's tone softened. Return to your war, Doom. The galaxy already burns without you. Leave this place before even I forget mercy. But mercy was not something the Slayer understood. He stepped forward. The golden aura flared, pressing against him like a physical force. His boots scraped across a surface that wasn't solid but refused to yield. The Emperor's radiance surged, waves of light peeling against his armor. Each step was agony. Systems failed. Plates melted. The visor cracked. Yet he moved still. Enough. The word was thunder. The light exploded outward. And for a heartbeat, all of existence vanished. When the world returned, the Slayer found himself once more in the heart of the warp, but it was no longer the same. The realms of chaos had collapsed inward, their boundaries twisted and burned. The sky was no longer red or purple, but black, truly black, the color of nothingness reclaiming its throne. And in the center of it all, suspended like an idea refusing to die, floated the heart of the warp, the origin of every sin, every fear, every act of faith. It pulsed slowly, the beat of a universe that refused to end. He walked toward it. Each step drew energy from his body, the air shimmering with the heat of collapsing dimensions. Behind him trailed the fading silhouettes of those he had slain. Khorne's fury, Slaanesh's beauty, Tzeentch's deception, Nurgle's decay, all reduced to shadows clinging to his wake. When he reached the edge of the heart, he looked down into it. It was beautiful, terrible, infinite, a storm of souls spiraling around a single point of stillness, and at its center, his reflection. Staring back at him, it stared back at him, his reflection, suspended within the molten core of the warp. But it was not a mirror. It was alive. The reflection breathed, moved, raised its weapon in perfect unison. Yet there was something wrong. Its visor glowed brighter, not with light but with eyes. Countless eyes opening inside the green, staring outward from behind the glass. The Doomslayer didn't hesitate. He fired. The sound of the shot vanished instantly, devoured by the void. The slug dissolved before it could reach its mark. The reflection remained untouched, but it smiled. Slowly, the surface of the warp's heart rippled. From it emerged the reflection in full, dragging itself upward as if climbing out of a sea of molten time. Its armor was black where his was green, and its presence bled cold instead of heat. When it spoke, the voice was not human, nor machine. It was the sound of all the screams the Slayer had never allowed himself to make. You are not their savior. The Slayer moved first. He lunged, driving his blade through the figure's chest. The impact split the world in half, shockwaves of psychic energy tearing across the dying warp. But the reflection did not bleed. It laughed. You are not their hero. The figure caught his arm, twisted, and drove its knee into his ribs, sending him crashing backward. The two collided again and again, each strike collapsing fragments of the warp around them. Mountains fell upward. Oceans burned. Planets flickered into being and died in the space of seconds. You are their disease, the reflection hissed. A weapon they forgot to bury. The Slayer roared, a sound no mortal throat could have made, and slammed his gauntlet into the ground. Energy pulsed outward, erasing the terrain for miles. The reflection vanished in the blast, only to reappear behind him, its blade cutting through his shoulder plate. Sparks burst like dying stars. He turned faster than thought and caught the mirrored wrist mid-swing. Their blades locked, edges grinding, light and dark feeding on each other. And then, the reflection spoke again, quieter this time, almost human. You don't understand. We are the same. Their visors met, green against abyss. For the first time, the Slayer saw himself not as flesh or fury, but as function, a being stripped of everything but purpose. And in that understanding came the whisper of truth. He was not fighting chaos anymore. He was fighting the idea of what he had become. The reflection pressed forward, forcing his blade toward his own throat. The pressure was immense, but his strength did not falter. The two forces stood locked, eternity bending around their struggle. Then, in the smallest flicker of stillness, the Doomslayer saw movement beyond them, within the heart of the warp itself. Something vast was watching, not the gods, not the Emperor. Something older, a presence without form, older than belief that had lived long before souls learned to dream. It stirred now, awakened by his violence, by the erasure of everything that gave the warp meaning. The reflection noticed it too. Both of them turned. From the heart of the void, light began to bleed. Not gold, not red, not any color that belonged to mortal perception. It was the first light, the origin of all thought and fear. And in that instant, both Slayer and reflection understood. This was the warp's true core, its living will. A god beyond gods, the concept of madness itself. It spoke with 1,000 voices layered over one another. Impossible to separate. You are not meant to exist. The reflection dissolved into vapor, screaming as it was reabsorbed into the light. The Doomslayer stood alone once more, his armor cracked, his visor shattered, his weapon little more than ruin. The voice continued, whispering now. You are the end of dream and faith alike. You are the wound I cannot heal. The Slayer holstered his weapon. His breath came heavy, though he made no sound. The light pulsed again, almost gently. If you destroy me, there will be nothing left. No gods, no mankind, no stars. He stepped closer. Do you understand, mortal? He reached down, picked up the blade that had fallen from his reflection's hand. Its edge shimmered with a fusion of shadow and light. The weapon hummed with the contradiction of all things, the tension between existence and erasure. For the first time in all the histories of creation, the warp trembled not from rage or fear, but from anticipation. The Doomslayer raised the blade above his head and drove it into the heart of the warp. There was no explosion, no scream, no sound. Only the collapse of meaning. Every prayer, every nightmare, every echo of what was and what could be folded inward. The warp blinked out of existence like a candle smothered beneath an infinite hand. And then, silence. When light returned, it was cold and pale. The Slayer stood on a barren plain of dust beneath a dead sky. There were no stars, no gods, no voices, only the distant hum of his armor barely alive. He was alone, truly alone, for the first time. There was peace. He turned toward the horizon where nothing waited, and began to walk. Each step left no mark. Each echo faded faster than the last. And as the last remnants of creation dissolved behind him, the universe whispered its final truth. Even the end must have someone to carry it.